So our topic today is Napoleon and the Empire of France. We have 3 daily objectives. Number 1, explain how Napoleon became the Emperor of France. Number 2, list the reforms that Napoleon enacts. And number 3, describe the mistakes that Napoleon made that lead to his eventual defeat. So we talked about how the French people had overthrown their king because the government just wasn't fair. The 3 estates did not give enough political power to 97% of the population. We talked about how the other, it scared, terrified the kings and queens of Europe. They invaded France to try to bring the king back. In response, the French people executed their king and said, deal with it. We then talked about how France institutes the first draft and people show up because they were proud to be French. They had discovered and they had felt nationalism for the first time in their lives and for the first time in most Europeans' lives. Which brings us to Napoleon Bonaparte. Pretty cool guy, not a bromance though. So Napoleon is born on Corsica. This is an island right off of Italy that's owned by France, where he attends a military school for his entire youth. He joins the army. He joins the army of the new government right along with those 300 in the draft, right at the beginning of the French Revolution. He actually becomes a hero. He stops a royalist counter coup in October 1795. He is considered a hero of the Republic. The war between France and the monarchies of Europe continued because of his notoriety as having stopped this coup, people trying to bring the king back. He is made a general of one of the French armies and wins a series of victories in Italy. His fame is growing. His reputation is growing. He's starting to become an important guy. This is him. Pretty cool guy. Napoleon goes to Egypt in an effort to gain control of English trade routes in the Middle East. He fails. He does come back to France shortly after. And at the behest of his friends, because he's got lots of friends, he's a popular guy now, he actually overthrows the French government, the Republic, and establishes himself as dictator of France. Because of his large army, because he's a military genius, he defeats the European monarchs. He signs a peace treaty, which allows France to continue with its new government form with him as its ruler. Partially, they let him go because, I mean, there's not that much difference between a dictator and a king. So they're pretty happy with Napoleon being in charge. But they are terrified of Napoleon. Don't get that wrong. So Napoleon enacts a number of reforms to try and solve the many problems that had plagued France under the Bourbon dynasty. So he sets up a public banking system and also improves tax collecting. So he knows exactly how much money everybody has because he's running the banks. And if you know how much money everybody has, it's much easier to collect taxes from people. He creates a state-ran and paid-for school for boys. They could earn an education, and they could eventually get a job in government. So he's really trying to build and create what is called a meritocracy. So giving people the opportunity to get their education, become educated, become smart, and then give the best and brightest the best jobs, instead of just having nobles run things. He writes the Napoleonic Code, which is a set of uniform laws which apply to all French people, not just the commoners, not just the nobles, not just the Catholic clergy, which did limit speech, and it also restored slavery to the French colonies, so it's kind of a double-edged sword on that one. In 1894, Napoleon crowns himself Emperor of the French Empire with the support of the Catholic Church. This is Napoleon as Emperor. So let's talk about foreign policy. Napoleon decides to cut his losses in the Americas. It's cost him too much money. Not worth it. It's just not worth it anymore. So he actually sells Louisiana to the United States. Louisiana Purchase, that happens under Napoleon. Now, he does this for 2 reasons. Number 1, he's tired of dealing with the French colonies. And number 2, it sets the United States up as a real political power in the world because they double the size of their territory. And it also sets them up as a rival against England. Because remember, the French and the English, the French and the Americans, we get along. They helped us get our independence. That's how it was, not anymore. They used the money gained from the Louisiana Purchase to declare war on the European monarchs again. Except this time, Napoleon wins. He conquers them. And he installs puppet governments in their place. So governments he control. At this point, 1812, almost all of Europe is under the command of Napoleon, except for England, Portugal, and the Ottoman Empire. So the dark blue is Napoleon's empire, directly ruled by France. Got some in Italy. This is actually Croatia. All of France. Got the Netherlands. All of these light blue states, all of these light blue countries, are countries he has taken over and put governments that are friendly to him in their place. So he's basically in charge of these. That's Spain, Holy Roman Empire. Remember that officially ends with Napoleon. This is Switzerland, the rest of Italy, as well as part of Poland. Purple. The purple countries are allies of Napoleon. So you're either an ally of Napoleon or you are Napoleon. There is no middle ground. Then he messes up. Napoleon makes a series of costly mistakes. Number one, he fails to beat the English. And as long as he fails to beat the English, there's a place where the European monarchs can run to and hide out and slowly build political support and military support. He loses the Peninsular War. So the Peninsular War is an attempt by Napoleon to put his brother on the throne of Spain. He loses this. Spain does not want Napoleon's brother as king. This leads to the death of 300,000 of Napoleon's best soldiers. Next problem, it's kind of a self-inflicted problem, is nationalism. Remember, nationalism leads to the French Revolution and ultimately leads to Napoleon in charge of France. Well, guess what? Napoleon doesn't just conquer all these new places. He brings the nationalism to these places. And now you got people in Austria and people in Germany thinking, why are we being ruled by a French guy? We're proud Austrians. We're proud Germans. We're proud Italians. We should be ruling ourselves. This fuels discontent and ultimately leads to revolution in these countries. Lastly, he does bring an army of 420,000 soldiers to attack Russia in the winter. Only 10,000 of these soldiers make it back. So he loses 410,000 soldiers in Russia. Loses another 300,000 in Spain. He's running out of soldiers, man. It's hard to rule an entire continent when you ain't got no men. So seizing upon these huge failures, Britain, Russia, Prussia, Sweden, and Austria declare war on Napoleon. Because Napoleon's experienced soldiers had all died, he loses pretty quick. I mean, he may be a military genius, but if you don't have guys who can execute your plans, you're not going to make it. The countries of Europe exile Napoleon to a tiny little island called Elba. They bring the Bourbon dynasty back to France. So Louis XVI, he's dead, but he's got kids and nephews and stuff, and they put them in charge. Within 3 months of being sent to Elba, Napoleon actually comes back to France, raises another army, and is once again crowned Emperor of France. People like Napoleon. He's popular. He's a hero. They love him. France wants Napoleon, but he's too dangerous to the other European powers. The European powers once again declare war on France. They defeat Napoleon, the Battle of Waterloo. He's again exiled to Elba. He dies 6 years later. Rumor has always been he was poisoned, he was assassinated, but nobody really knows. This is the Battle of Waterloo. Pretty epic. Which leads us to the Congress of Vienna in 1815. So this is what Europe looked like under Napoleon. This is what Europe looks like after Napoleon. So basically all of the European powers come together, the kings and queens, and they decide two things. Number one, what Europe is going to look like. These are the countries of Europe. Here's what they are. Here's who's in charge. Number two, they actually decide who gets what colonies. So they break up the North American colonies. English, you get these ones. French, you get these ones. Italy, Spain, you get these ones. Africa, that's the other big thing because we're getting ready to start talking about imperialism and the conquest of Africa. They break up Africa for the European powers. You get these areas in Africa. You get these other areas in Africa. All that happens at the Congress of Vienna. Notice France has gotten a lot smaller. Take a few minutes, answer your 3 daily objectives.